There's also the topic of Hungary. Today on our broadcast, Ukraine is preparing legal action against Hungary over the confiscated money from armored cash-in-transit vehicles at State Bank. This was confirmed by the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, György Tiki. He says that Kyiv is waiting for the return of the stolen funds and will demand justice and accountability. Also, the day before, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha called on Budapest to return the currency and gold bars. The minister emphasized that this money does not belong to Hungary or its government. They belong to the State Bank of Ukraine, SHAMED Bank, and therefore to Ukrainian taxpayers. Mr. Anton, why did Orban take such a step in the first place? This is an international scandal.
Demonization of Ukraine ahead of a possible vote in the European Union for the allocation of 90 billion euros for military and economic support for Ukraine. That's why he's doing it. In this way, by creating a demonic image of Ukraine, an image of corruption. He needed a picture, you understand. In other words, this money was being moved absolutely legally. There is an agreement between Raiffeisen Bank, the Austrian one, and SHAMED Bank regarding the relevant currency operations which take place within the framework of current international law, if you can put it that way. So Orban needed a certain image. Everything was coordinated, meaning customs clearance was done and so on, so it's clear that there was information. They decided to create an image like what? Look, corrupt Ukrainian money, and as Szijjártó, the Hungarian Minister of Foreign Affairs, said, these are probably the funds of the Ukrainian military mafia. Well, you know, that's a rather strange way to put it. The Ukrainian military mafia. So they made this image for themselves for the elections, and that's it. As for the scandal, they'll try to sort it out somehow, maybe even return the money. I think there will be pressure from European partners, because this is exactly within the framework of an international agreement. This money was moving through the territory of Hungary, among other places. And they've created this image, continuing to demonize Ukraine. For the most part, this will work for their domestic electorate. And as for Western partners in the European Union, I think they will push for a resolution of this situation. Hungary is absolutely in the wrong. In fact, you know, like thieves, they just, excuse the slang, muscled in and stole it right on the street. These are Ukrainian state funds. And
why exactly is Orban so unwaveringly certain that this persistent and aggressive demonization of Ukraine will ultimately assist him in winning the upcoming elections?
The right-wing electorate, which is against international aid and accordingly buys into the scare stories that supposedly if Ukraine becomes an EU member, Hungary will get less money and that Ukraine is pushing for war, that's his electorate. In other words, his electorate believes these narratives. That's why he plays along with these sentiments. That's how it is.
However, recent public opinion polls show that his main opponent, the opposition candidate Péter Magyar, is now pulling ahead of Orban.
By 8 to 10%, but this lead in terms of, let's say, an actual vote is still more of a projection than a fact. It's more of a voting projection than a reality. Everything will be decided by turnout and the mobilization of the electorate through demonization. Orban mobilizes his electorate by demonizing Ukraine's image, so it's good that the opponent is ahead, but he is not always loyal to Ukraine. Nevertheless, it's better than Orban.
In your opinion, what was the role of the Russians in planning this move by the Hungarian authorities regarding the detention of our funds and couriers?
I don't have any reliable data, but it's obvious that Orban could have come up with such idiotic actions.
Yes, and Slovakia is also ready, following Hungary's example, to block the European Union loan for Ukraine in the amount of 90 billion euros if Viktor Orban's Fidesz party loses the elections. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico published a video in which he stated that the loan for Kyiv is now effectively blocked. He added that he plans to discuss the issue of stopping the oil pipeline at an upcoming meeting with the head of the European Commission. Friendship. Mr. Anton, will we get this money or not? Will the European Union find mechanisms to bypass Fico and Orban?
Desire will find. Here, if we talk about the Druzhba oil pipeline, then it is obvious about the Russian one. The lobby works in the form of Fico and Orban. And it's very strange when, knowing that the oil pipeline is damaged, and not through our fault, but as a result of Missile strikes from the Russian Federation, they make claims against Ukraine. This is precisely because the process is being politicized in order to delay the voting process and Ukraine's movement toward membership in the European Union, and so on. So here the political interest is clear, as is the lobbying interest. Fico's motives are also clear. Can the European Commission or other bodies find a way to deal with this? They can. All that's needed is the will.
And this isn't the first time either.
Well, somehow they managed to vote on 19 sanction packages before this. They somehow found common ground. So it's clear that now Slovakia and Hungary will want some money, some compensation, in exchange for not blocking something. This is a familiar story, a traditional one. That's why I say that in principle they can be persuaded. Because, you shouldn't play around with legalities here either. Since, for example, a union made up of 27 countries can't be held hostage to the whims of 2 individual states, or even just one. So here, it's about the principle of political justice. It's a bit flawed, and there are certain draft documents circulating behind the scenes, let's say, in the big offices of Brussels, where they actually want to change the voting system within the European Union.
Mr. Anton, thank you for coming to our studio today and for your analysis. Anton Kuchukhidze, political scientist, international expert, co-founder of the analytical center United,